Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all my blessed beloveds out there in living and thriving land. You're watching Living and Thriving with Rustie, and I'm Rustie. Today, I have a special guest on, Joey, and he's going to tell us about his new book. It's part fiction and part truth, or is it truthful fiction? You're just going to have to tune in to find out. Hi, Joey. How are you?
Good, Rusty. Pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you. So you have a truth fiction or a fiction truth?
Um, it's uh, it's historical fiction based upon a true story.
Okay, so give me the dish because you had me curious for the last couple of days. So
Yeah, yeah. This,
here.
uh, William Shepard is a forgotten African American hero, and he went to the Congo in 1890, and he ended up taking on King Leopold of Belgium, who had enslaved the entire Congo for the rubber trade. And Leopold was responsible for the deaths of an estimated 8 to 10 million people. And it was Shepard who spoke out against the atrocities, and it led to the first international human rights trial. So he
Shut
is a
the front door. So my
yeah.
theory that we've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years, you just proved me right. Oh, I love it.
Well, and in reading about your podcast, the whole idea of living and thriving and overcoming incredible obstacles, that's really Shepard's life story. And so I fictionalized it in a novel, but it's based upon 13 years of research.
Why Shepherd? What was it that fell out of the bookshelf that slapped you and said, "Hey, let's write about a dead guy"?
It's a great question because my brother-in-law came to me 13 years ago and said, "Hey, have you ever written a screenplay?" And I'd written many books before, and I said, I studied screenwriting for 6 months and wrote one bad screenplay. And he said, "Well, I want you to read this book." And over the course of the next week, I read the book, and I went back to him the following week, and I said, "We absolutely have to tell this story." So it's really the most fascinating story I've ever heard. And so that began 2 years of research and writing. So the book actually began with the screenplay, and it won a number of early screenwriting awards. We've worked for many years to get it produced. We've now changed it into a 10 episode limited series. And so I started the novel 3 years ago. So we've reversed engineered the whole process.
I think that's awesome. Where did you find information on these fellas? I mean, I worked in Belgium, beautiful country, beautiful people. I could never imagine the tyranny that seems to have happened at that time period. But again, we're dealing with humans. And so being what they are, this walking sack of dichotomy, it's intriguing to me to see this cross-continental tyranny.
Right. It's a fascinating story because it really plays out first in America, then in Europe during the Great Scramble for Africa. So for Belgium, King Leopold fooled all of Western Europe, stating that he wanted the Congo for commerce, for civilization, and for Christianity. And all of the European nations were dividing up Africa, interesting enough, with not one African in the room. And so Shepard's story fits squarely during this period where he went over with another white missionary as Presbyterians. They went to establish a mission, but when they got there, they discovered that Leopold had filled the nation with mercenaries. He was building railroads. He was going after the ivory and eventually the rubber trade, for which he enslaved the whole nation, because at the turn of the century, it was the Industrial Revolution. So everybody needed rubber for bicycle tires, for automobile tires. It was this worldwide boom, and Leopold was right at the center of it. And in today's world, there's a lot of people that still don't believe that Leopold did all that the atrocities didn't exist. There's a big pushback against it. But in terms of the books and the research, one of the key books out there is called King Leopold's Ghost. Adam Hochschild wrote that, UC Berkeley professor. There's probably only 2 or 3 other nonfiction books that talk about Shepard's life story, but he really was a hero of his day.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate because I do that well. Now, being a history person myself,
Mhm.
I understand that history is written with the tongue that is most profited.
Yes.
So do you feel that some of the information that you've received has a thread of untruth to it? It's been rewritten so many times. I struggle with fact versus possible fact.
Sure. And that's a great question. It's a valid question. Uh, so, in the early years of research and writing, what that led Ken and I to was the current conditions in the Congo. The Congo, right now, the Democratic Republic of Congo, is one of the poorest nations in the world. And it's primarily because of what they call the resource curse. So, all the minerals and chemicals and things in our cell phones. A lot of those come from the Congo. There's gold, there's ivory, there's diamonds, there's tin, there's tungsten. In the Eastern Congo, it's one of the most embattled nations in the world. And what most people don't know, just like there was a genocide in Rwanda 25 years ago and almost 1 million people died, well, that genocide moved west into the Congo. So in the past 25 years, over 6 million people have died in the Congo. So when you look at just the current state of the Congo, you have to ask, where did it begin? And the Congo has only had three major, or actually four major rulers. So its history in terms of leadership is very short, and it all dates back to Leopold.
Could you imagine being this delightfully colorful tribal person humming along beautiful Africa and having a barrage of greedy people attack you, your family, your country, and not having any control over that? I would think that's a perpetual nightmare for most people in that area.
Absolutely. And so what brought us to the story was certainly curiosity. What has kept us here and in this long journey for 13 years is a sense of outrage that we're hoping that this book, this limited film series, is going to really shed a light on the current conditions in the Congo. I've been to the Congo. I was there in 2015. I have very good friends who are Congolese that live and work in the Eastern Congo. There are a couple of key leaders there. And so it's become something very personal and dear to me because there's still a lot of work to be done in that country, as the rest of Africa. And so it really begs the question. Kind of one of the themes of the book is that Shepherd is after the restoration of all things. He wants to make things better for the people both in America that he loves, because when he comes back, he's dealing with Jim Crow laws, and for the people that he's been with in Africa for 20 years.
Tell us a little bit more about Shepherd, and then do you have the book handy there so you can show us the cover?
I do. Here's the cover right here. And so this is William Shepherd with one of the Kuba chiefs. And I love that question. Tell me more about Shepherd, because he really is an African-American figure with a number of firsts. So real quick, he was born in Waynesboro, Virginia. He went to Hampton University in Virginia. It had a different name back then. And he was the first African-American man to discover a hidden African kingdom that no white man discovered. It was called the Kuba Kingdom. And because he discovered the Kuba Kingdom, he also became the first Black man inducted into the Royal Geographic Society by Queen Victoria. He had tea with the Queen, who also happened to be King Leopold's cousin. So Leopold had this great jealousy over his cousin Victoria, who amassed colonies throughout the world. Well, because of this feat, Shepherd met with 4 U.S. presidents. He spoke at Black and white churches and universities up and down the East Coast. He brought back what is known as one of the top African art collections, which is now in Hampton Museum. And as the story goes, as everything leads up to this first international human rights trial, he really is one of the forefathers of the modern um, human rights movement. And so he wrote children's books. He was an explorer, a hunter. He's a fascinating character. I've just fallen in love with him. It's just amazing the things that he accomplished.
Well, it's amazing that we didn't have that literature growing up. I grew up in the South, and as you know, we have difficulties when you are more open-minded. There's a lot of closed-minded people here, and that's just generational curse, I think. But I would have loved to have learned more about him.
Yeah, and well, it's interesting because the whole story is set in the Victoria era. So there are things where, for people in that time, they keep things a lot closer to the chest. They're not as open as as Americans are today, and so it's a story of friendship between him and Samuel Lapsley, his white missionary partner. It's a story of courage. It's a story of perseverance, and it's ultimately it's a story of overcoming evil with good. And I think it's just really relevant for the day and age that we're living in today.
So I'm going to throw you a curveball and ask you about the Grove Center for the Arts and Media.
Sure. Well, the Grove Center for the Arts and Media is a nonprofit organization I started 18 years ago, and the focus of our work is cultivating the spiritual life and the creative work of artists. So we have artist retreats. We work with filmmakers, writers, musicians, poets, visual artists, all kinds of artists. And our whole goal is to really help artists become fully alive, whole, really integrated in not only their personal lives, but their work. And so we offer all kinds of online resources. It's just a creative, dynamic center. And we do that here in Southern California, but we do have artists that come from across the country who participate in our events.
When it's not COVID, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we've had to cancel a couple of our retreats the past 6 months.
I bet. So that's really exciting. So you really walk the walk and talk the talk.
Well, I call myself a player coach. I've got my own creative projects that I'm working on, but at the same time, encourage and walk alongside artists with helping them achieve their dreams.
What was your favorite part of the last 13 years with this journey with Shepherd, and how did he pass away? I know that sounds kind of morbid, but sometimes they don't have the grand finale that we would hope, especially if you've fallen in love.
Absolutely. Well, first off, I think the favorite part of the journey has been doing this work alongside my brother-in-law, because we've just become dear friends and really close working companions. And probably second is just loving telling the story, seeing people's eyes come alive as I tell the story, because it's really a fascinating story. And all of us, we really relate to stories. So it's a great story to tell. So that'd probably be my favorite two parts. And then in terms of, working with artists and really helping people thrive. When I read the title of your podcast, Living and Thriving, that's really what I'm about, is helping to do that as well. So that's where I was really eager to connect and reach out to you.
Well, thank you. I believe that we put far too much stock in media and publicity and the bad guys or the uber wealthy, and we neglect the people like Shepherd that do a lot more for their community and are not spoken about as highly as one would hope, hindsight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and
I believe that there are more people on this planet that are fantastic, beautiful, amazing souls. And I have the forum to bring that to light. And that's my goal and my mission in life. Kind of like you you want to cherish the beauty that we've been given. And this world is actually very beautiful. Yes, there are pockets of yucky, but the more we focus on the beautiful and grow the beautiful, the less the yucky matters.
Absolutely. So in that, I'm sure you're helping a lot of people. And my apologies, I did want to answer your question. Shepherd died when he was about 64 years old, and he died of a stroke. And he's buried in Louisville, Kentucky. So my apologies, I didn't get that fully
That's
answer
okay. I was going to
for
ask you again. Alzheimer's hits us all after 30.
you. That's right.
So what an appropriate conversation to have after the hearing on Breonna Taylor's death yesterday. And again, I'm getting goosebumps, but you know, I'm Native American and it's just, and a woman.
Mhm.
So thousands and thousands of years of picking on somebody, and we just don't stop picking. I wonder what that's about. Did you discover any clues or tidbits or morsels for us to get over ourselves?
Well, I think it's such a big subject, and so as you look at human nature, there is this dynamic that there is human greed and selfishness where people just are staked out for themselves, and then there's the capacity for compassion and love and empathy. And you and I, like anybody else in the world, doesn't matter our stature or our role in terms of leadership, we all have that capacity to move towards love, compassion, kindness, or jealousy, hatred, and greed, or whatever the negative element may be. So I think it really involves surrounding ourselves with people who want to move in that direction, so that we again are overcoming evil with good, and developing our characters and our hearts in a way that can really, even if we don't agree with a person, we still can look at them and say, hey, you matter. You are made in the image of God. I respect you. We don't have to agree on everything, and that's okay.
I was, I'm one of those evil little people that I've studied so much research and history that I sneak things in, especially in my social media.
Mhm.
And there was this huge controversy on one of my social media platforms on what racism really is and why this is such a huge issue right now. And I'm going through my archives, I'm dusting off those brain shelves. I'm like, what is really going to be pivotal? What's really going to boom people? And I remembered the zoo, the zoo in which they held humans,
Mhm.
pygmies, Native Americans,
Mhm.
as display like animals and treated them in the whole eugenics ideology. And
Right.
that wasn't actually very long ago, 1942.
No, it
So
wasn't long ago. Yeah.
we've, for some reason, somewhere in the development of our community or society, our brain, our education, I'm still trying to find that little magic nugget myself. We continue the same behavior. And then we act surprised that the behavior is still there. And yet, just a few years ago, I mean, 1942 really isn't that far away. It's
Right.
further away from my birth date, but you know what I'm saying. It's
Mhm.
not like the 1400s. Um, but even in the 1400s, we were kidnapping women all over the world for harems, you know? So it's like, what, how do we change that temptation for hatred, greed, selfishness, and hoarding? Hoarding people, hoarding toilet paper, hoarding water. You're in California, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, from my, personal experience and life experience, that's why I really do believe that it's, people really need to look to God to help them to do that, and there's a lot of different beliefs and religions out there, but ultimately, I do think that as humans, we really need to look above and beyond ourselves to find that capacity and strength and power to live a different way. And again, it goes down to a daily choice to do that.
Do you think, and again, back to putting my horns on, do you think, because you and I are deeply spiritual and I very much respect that, but this whole process with Shepherd was part of the mission, the missionary, the Christian missionaries trying to change those wildens, like they murdered most of the Native Americans.
Hmm.
Do you think that the use of religion has become self-purposed versus what the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Kabbalah
Right, right.
really
It's a
talk about?
valid question because throughout history, there has been the abuse of religion, as there has been the abuse of justice, the abuse of government and politics and power. Any human institution really reflects the nature and heart of man. So absolutely, there have been abuses. At the same time, and let's look at Africa and colonization and Christianity, because there's many critics about that. At the same time, there have always been individuals. Let's look at Oscar Schindler of movie fame, Schindler's List. Jewish man or non-Jewish man. There have always been people who have been light in the darkness, who have really lived lives of authentic faith and not just religiosity to the letter of the law, but they've really been light, and they've really held back future evil that could have been perpetuated. So in Shepard's case, by him standing up against Leopold's abuses and atrocities, he brought down Leopold. Belgium ended up stripping the Congo away from Leopold as his personal possession. And even though Belgium continued to rule the Congo as a nation, things were dramatically different after Leopold was never in reign. So in terms of religion and individuals, there have always been people who, in their authenticity and them standing up for what is good and right and true, dispel the differences of just the system of religion. That's what I've seen throughout history.
Eloquently put, my man. All right, so if you were a magician and you had a magic wand, what would you do with it? And you only had one flick.
Wow. Well, based upon what I've been doing the past 13 years, if I could change all the conditions in the Congo so that it's a peaceful, thriving Congo led by Congolese people, that's what I would do with that wand.
Oh, that's beautiful. I happen to wonder, and I'm going to pick your brain a little bit, but we have to wrap up, and I want to make sure you get your information out so that people can buy your book, because I think it's absolutely important. History. So my philosophy, and I don't know if you've seen any of my shows, but I'm really big on killing your television, because I think it just brainwashes people into stupid shit. Mm-hmm. And then I believe that people need to read more and speak more. And not in an argumentative way, but I mean, we've had a fantastic conversation just learning. And I think we need more of that. Do you think if you and I had a magic wand that we shared together and we could make everybody have a great conversation, eventually we would be able to weed out some of the nonsense that killed so many people?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, and I think that's really the dilemma that America is in right now. There are those who are crying out, rightly so, for justice. And at the same time, in a different frame of reference, there are people who are looking at the American way of life and are fearful that the things that America values or its principles are falling apart. So again, two different sides of that conversation. So by having more civil conversation, by coming together in the areas where we can agree, we can form better systems, because that's been proven through the course of democracy. Is democracy perfect? Absolutely not. Is it better than a lot of other government systems that have been oppressive regimes? Absolutely. So we need to move in the direction of what works.
Well, my big thing is when I become president, my first executive order is a mandate to make everybody travel. I don't believe that if you stay in your town your whole entire life, that you learn very much.
Absolutely.
And so in traveling, I think just traveling alone, I think it would change the dynamic of how people receive other people. It won't be so strange.
Absolutely. It breaks down those walls. It builds bridges. You understand different cultures, different people, different languages. It's absolutely beneficial. That's a great executive order.
Thank you. All right, Joey, where do we find more information? Hold up your book again so that we can see the cover, because some of us will forget. I'm over 35.
Okay. So it's Among Kings. and it's available on Amazon. And they can just do a search on Amazon. If they want to go to my website at Joey O'Connor with an OR.org, they can get information about it there. I have all sorts of videos I've posted about the story, just sharing more about the different characters, different angles on the story. So that's the easiest place to find it.
So what's your next step? What's your next adventure?
Well, there's a character in Among Kings named Edmund Morel, and he is also a true historical character. He led what was called the Congo Reform Association, and he had worked with Shepherd to help bring down Leopold from London. And he assembled all the literary greats of his day to speak out against the atrocities going on in the Congo. So my next step is writing his life story, coming at it from a different angle. So Shepherd's in the Congo, Morel's in London doing his work. So that's the next project to take on.
So when is the little mini series coming out? Do you know?
Well, we're working on that. We're working on pitching that to folks in Hollywood. So keep us in your prayers.
I will, and they don't got nothing better to do right now. It's COVID. So
right.
This might be actually a good thing before the holidays.
Yes.
When that comes out, don't lose my number. Make sure we reconnect so that we can do something in regards to the series. I'm really excited, and I'm glad that you found me, because this is the exact kind of conversation I like to have and share with my international audience, because I believe education is power, and when you're powerful, you are humble.
That's right. Thank you, Rustie, so much for having me. It's a pleasure being with you.
Thank you. You're watching Living and Thriving with Rustie. I'm Rustie. That was Joey. Check him out. Look at the book. He's fantastic, and he does exactly what Living and Thriving is all about. Pulling out the ooey gooey about people and why they do what they do. And Mr. Shepherd, he had a lot of work ahead of him, but he did it, didn't he? So when you think that things are really bad, yeah, they probably are. Could they be worse? Yeah, they could be worse, but what are you going to do about it in between? What's going to burn your ass big enough so that you fight hard enough and smart enough to make changes in this world? Because we need change makers, rainmakers. Anyway, mommy's lecture's over. 2 cookies, not 4. Knock on your neighbor, make sure they're still there. Go and have a Nerf gun fight. My favorite, I love them. Water balloon fights, go have fun. Dance in the rain, sing, nobody's listening to you, so it doesn't matter. Their noses are stuck in their phone. You can even dance in your living room naked right now with your windows totally open, and your neighbors wouldn't even know. They're too busy on the phone. So go have fun in life. I'll talk to you soon.